Jericho Brown hangs on to things. He hangs on to his southern roots with its smells of magnolia, the cadences of southern preachers at the revival, the fear of white-sheeted KKK in front of his school, the clean kitchens with shelves of canned fruit, you know, the way they used to do it in the pressure cooker, and the industrious brown hands who prepares the grits and the eggs. Jericho Brown hangs on to his past. His home in Shreveport, Louisiana, his work in the mayor's office in New Orleans, his ancestry made up of Nelson Demery I, Nelson Demery II, and his own identity as Nelson Demery III. He hangs on to his education at Dillard University, at the University of New Orleans, at the University of Houston, where he got respectively his BA, his MFA, and his PhD degrees. Jericho Brown hangs on to his dialect, that softened, lilting speech that feels sometimes like the breezes off of the Mississippi riverbank. He hangs on to his fierce devotion to his poetry that has resulted in many awards and fellowships, and especially in that first book, Please, that won, surprisingly for him, the American Book Award. First out, 2009. He also hangs on to an urgency to tell the truth, even when that truth hurts. I am so pleased that Jericho Brown hangs on to the Furious Flower Poetry Center, because this is the third time he has graced a program of Furious Flower. The first time was in 2010, in September, when he was one of 73 voices honoring Lucille Clifton. The second time was just recently at Virginia Tech, when he did a standout performance of Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, a passage from The Bluest Eye. And now, today, here in this solo reading, and he just said, you know, I've been wanting to do this a long time. And so I'm glad that we were in sync, because I've been wanting him to do this a long time. We are so glad that he hangs on to us. And I would say to you, I think you will hang on to his every word as he does his reading, because this brilliant young man has something very important to say. So would you help me welcome to JMU, Jericho Brown.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm going to turn everything on. I have 9 mics. Thank you so much, Joanne Gavin, for that introduction. That's very nice. Y'all heard all those nice things she said? I wish you would tell my mother that. I always try to tell her those things about me, and you know, she doesn't believe me, but if you call her, maybe she'll start to actually believe some of those things about me. It really is a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Amber and Elizabeth and everyone with Furious Flower. Thank you, Joanne Gavin, for your stewarding of Furious Flower. This is an important day for me because it is the opportunity to give. Are there any poets here? Are there any poets? Some people are like scared to say this, but this whole row, this entire row of people behind me, they're like all poets. But there's like a poet right here. You see the hood on this guy right here? He's a poet. He's just like, there's one poet. Are there any more poets? There's one like, he's like bona fide. He's like, you're a poet. You're like, I'm not scared. I'm a poet. You're a poet. You're a poet. There are poets. Oh, there's a, okay, God, okay. You'll be asked for money later. There's a poet. Oh, we got a poet. Okay, you're a resistant poet. There's a poet, right? People are raising other people's hands. When you're a poet, you understand that what you do to give. You do to make a contribution to literature, to poetry, to something that you really do believe makes a difference on this planet, in this country, in the state of Virginia, and at a university like JMU. And so what Furious Flower has done is made a difference and allowed people like me to change and to grow. And so me being here makes me feel like I'm able to contribute to that difference. So I'm going to read to you a few of my poems. I'm going to read a few poems from my first book, Please, as well as a few poems from a second book that is coming out from Copper Canyon in late 2014. The book is titled The New Testament. My mother's really mad about that. My mom's mad at me, and my sister was like, so what are you going to call it? I was like, I'm going to call it The New Testament. And my sister was like, you realize no one's going to be able to find that on Google. But I'm calling it that anyway. Where I'm from, I'm going to read a few poems from Please and from the New Testament, and I'll give terms and background where it's necessary before reading the poem. Where I'm from, we always begin with prayer. So, prayer of the backhanded. Not the palm, not the pear tree switch, not the broomstick, nor the closest extension cord, not his braided belt, but God. Bless the back of my daddy's hand, which, holding nothing tightly against me and not wrapped in leather, eliminated the air between itself and my cheek. Make full this dimpled cheek, unworthy of its unfisted print, and forgive my forgetting the love of a hand hungry for reflex, a hand that took no thought of its target, like hail from a blind sky, involuntary, fast, but brutal in its bruising. Father, I bear the bridge of what might have been a broken nose. I lift to you what was a busted lip. Bless the boy who believes his best beatings lack intention, the mark of the beast. Bring back to life the son who glories in the sin of immediacy, calling it love. God, save the man whose arm, like an angel's invisible wing, may fly backward in fury, whether or not his son stands near. Help me hold in place my blazing jaw as I think to say, excuse me. For this next poem, you may want to know that the radio staple Memory Lane was released posthumously by Capitol Records from the 1979 album Many. Memory Lane is my favorite song by a singer named Minnie Riperton. Many of you may not know who Minnie Riperton is. If you don't know her, the best way to sort of get an idea of who she is to think of her as sort of, she's the major influence of the singer Mariah Carey, because she had the ability to hit those really high notes that you either love or they make you sort of want to turn the stereo down. The song that many people know by Minnie Riperton is a song called Loving You, and the chorus is something like la 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 dooby dooby doo doo. Yeah. That song. This is not about that song. Track 3, Back Down, Memory Lane. Dangerous men park carefully, slanting, oversized automobiles into the ditches that line 77th. It's Friday night in Shreveport. Checks have been cashed, bills folded and stashed into wallets and bra straps. Card tables, folding chairs, and every gold tooth in town crowd our grandmother's camelback shotgun house, because gambling's illegal in Shreveport, and she cuts only $2 a hand for every joker that slides into a queen. We don't know Minnie Riperton's dead, years now, buried with one breast to her name. School uniformed in a corner, we learn to listen to music over hollers, through smoke. Her soprano comes across a photograph and giggles, but ends up crying. Save me. We think we like that kind of love, sad and steeped in trumpets, though a block up, the entire decade shoots for words to put in the dictionary. Crackhead, drive-by, loss, and gain. The bullet meant for a man named Money removes his baby sister's chin. Ask for horns in Shreveport, and sirens are on the way. We can't hear either grandmama calling for us to change the tape. No more slow songs. Keep us awake. These years before surgeons slice her in vain, and we drive away, our car stereos playing rhythm and blues. Again, you are not as tired of the poem as I am of the memory. A returning toothache on either side of the mouth, an ingrown hair beneath the chin, simple itch, bruising, scratch. And again, I am bundled in Cousin Kenny's clothes from last school year, my hand held by my mother's. We walk as if the house behind us isn't warm enough for my feet. In the dark, we make a few blocks around the one-story neighborhood that I loved, though nothing I've written tells you this. I want to cut it out of me, because turns out it never mattered. Right now, my mother's asleep on my father's chest. His arm has landed in the same place around her most of 30 years. Give a man a minute. She's asleep, and I'm typing it all over again. Everywhere, a man is shifting a bit to make his woman more comfortable in his arms. I should have told you this lines ago. We walked back to the house we ran from because my mother loves her husband and his hands, even if laid heavy against her. I know you don't want to believe that, but give a man a minute. We're not done. My father loves his wife and the shape of her body, even if hunched in retreat, their son keeping up. I'm so sick of it. Another awful father scarring this page too. A bruising scratch. We walked back through an open door. And why don't I mention how he covered me on the couch that was my bed, and then kissed me goodnight on my head. Listen, and you can hear them in the next room, planning names for the youngest of us, then making love loud enough for the oldest to learn. Odd jobs. I spent what light Saturday sent sweating and learned to cuss cutting grass for women kind enough to say they couldn't tell the damned difference between their mowed lawns and their vacuumed carpets just before handing over a $5 bill rolled tighter than a joint and asking me in to change a few light bulbs. I called those women old because they wouldn't move out of a chair without my help or walk without a hand at the base of their backs. I called them old, and they must have been. They're all dead now, dead and in the earth I once tended. The loneliest people have the earth to love, and not one friend their own age. Only mothers to baby them, and big sisters to boss them around. Women they want to please and pray for the chance to say please to. I don't do that kind of work anymore. My job is to look at the childhood I hated and say, I once had something to do with my hands. So this next poem is titled After a Word. I wrote this poem, I just moved to Atlanta from San Diego, California, and I wrote this poem as a kind of elegy for these words that I used to hear all the time. And so this poem is titled After a Word. Some of you will know this word, and some of you won't. The word is nim. Now, those of you who don't know the word, I'll explain it to you. Let's say you want to talk about Beyonce after she's left Destiny's Child. But you want to talk about Beyonce at the Super Bowl when Destiny's Child jumps up out of the stage. So you don't really call that Beyonce. What you call that is Beyonce Nim. Another example, might be if you're supposed to be somewhere, and so you tell your mother where you're supposed to be. But you don't want your mother you don't want her to necessarily know everyone who's there. So you look around the room, because you know your mother's on the phone and she's asking, where are you? And you find the person with glasses. And the person with glasses is named, I don't know, Nelson. And you say, oh, Mom, everything all right. I'm over here with Nelson them. That's how the word works. Now, they said to say goodnight and not goodbye. Unplugged the TV when it rained. They hid money in mattresses, so to sleep on decisions. Some of their children were not their children. Some of their parents had no birth dates. They could sweat a cold out of you. They'd wake without an alarm telling them to. Even the short ones reached certain shelves. Even the skinny cooked animals too quick to get caught. And I don't care how ugly one of them arrived, that one got married to somebody fine. They fed families with change and wiped their kitchens clean. Then another century came. People like me forgot their names. Are y'all all right?
We're fine. We're just holding ourselves back. We want to clap, but it's so dramatic. We just don't even want to interrupt the flow. But this is African American poetry. You can't interrupt with applause.
Y'all really shouldn't clap though, because this isn't even the part where I take my clothes off. I wish that was a joke. From the King James Version of the Bible. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. 1 Corinthians 13 and 11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I even had a child's disease. I ran from the Doberman, like all children on my street. But old men called me special. The Doberman caught up, chewed my right knee. Limp now in 2 places. I carried a child's Bible like a football under the arm that didn't ache. I was never alone. I owned my brother's shame of me. I loved the words thou and thee. Both meant my tongue in front of my teeth. Both meant a someone speaking to me. So what if I itched? So what if I couldn't breathe? I climbed the cyclone fence like children on my street and went first when old men asked for a boy to pray or to read. Some had it worse. Nobody whipped me with a water hose or a phone cord or a leash. Old men said I'd grow into my face, and I did before I died. Now everybody's got to clap all the time. I'm going to shift gears here just a little and read for you a few persona poems. For those of you who don't know, a persona poem is simply a poem that's most definitely not in the voice of the poet. So a persona poem, the persona poet that I think of and love more than anyone else is a poet by the name of I, whose books you should read. You spell her name A-I, it's just the first name, you know, like Madonna. It's like Cher. She's an icon like that too. Another poet of the persona or of the dramatic monologue is a poet by the name of Robert Browning, poets that I think all of you should be familiar with. But to take a character or to take even an inanimate object like these chairs, right? If you were to write a poem in the voice of one of these chairs, that poem might start, "Why would you put that on me?" So this first poem is I just had a flashback. Okay, no, this first poem is in the voice of the leading figure of the Harlem Renaissance, and it references his favorite singer, the queen, the empress of blues, Bessie Smith. It takes lines from his testimony before the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Un-American Activities during McCarthyism and the Red Scare of the 1950s. It was a time where if you sneezed in the wrong direction, people would accuse you of being a communist. And this poem is also makes allusion to his very famous poem, a poem called The Negro Speaks of Rivers. If you do not know The Negro Speaks of Rivers, it's an absolutely amazing poem that Langston Hughes wrote when he was 18 years old. Every time I think about Langston Hughes writing a poem that amazing, every time I think about him writing The Negro Speaks of Rivers when he was only 18 years old, I really hate Langston Hughes. If he wasn't dead, I'd kill him. So this is Langston. Langston, blue. O blood of the river of songs. O songs of the river of blood. Let me lie down. Let my words lie sound in the mouths of men, repeating their invocations pure and perfect as a moan that mounts in the mouth of Bessie Smith. Blues for the angels kicked out of heaven. Blues for the angels who miss them still. Blues for my people and whatever water they know. Oh, weary drinkers drinking from the bloody river. Why go to heaven with Harlem so close? Why sing of rivers with a daddy of my own to miss? I remember him and taste a stain like blood coursing the body of a man chased by a mob. I write his running, his sweat. Here he climbs a poplar for the sky, but it is only sky. The river? Follow me, you'll see. We tried to fly and learned we couldn't swim. Dear singing river full of my blood, are we as loud under water? Is it blood that binds brothers? Or is it the Mississippi running through the fattest vein of America? When I say home, I mean I wanted to write some lines. I wanted to hear the blues, but here I am, swimming in the river again. What runs through the fat veins of a drowned body? What America can a body call home When I say Congo, I mean blood. When I say Nile, I mean blood. When I say Euphrates, I mean, if only you knew what blood we have in common. So much in Louisiana, they call a man like me red. And red was too dark for my daddy, and my daddy was too dark for America. He ran like a man from my mother and me, and my mother's sobs are the songs of Bessie Smith, who wears more feathers than death. Oh, the death my people refuse to die. When I was 18, I wrote down the river, though I couldn't win a race. Climbed a tree that winter, then fell flat on my wet, red face. Line after line, I read all the time, but there was nothing I could do about race. Home stretch, I swear. This next poem is for this next poem, you may want to know that Janis Joplin recorded the Gershwin standard "Summertime" with Big Brother and the Holding Company for their 1968 chart-topping album "Cheap Thrills." She died of a heroin overdose in 1970. She was 27 years old. Track 5, "Summertime," as performed by Janis Joplin. God's got his eye on me, but I ain't a sparrow. I'm more like a lawnmower. No, a chainsaw. Anything that might mangle each manicured lawn in Port Arthur, a place I wouldn't return to if the mayor offered me every ounce of oil my daddy cans at the refinery. My voice, ain't sweet. Nothing nice about it. It won't fly, even with Jesus watching. I don't believe in Jesus. The Baxter boys climbed a tree just to throw persimmons at me. The good and perfect gifts from above hit like lightning, leave bruises. So I lied. I believe, but I don't think God likes me. The girls in the locker room slapped dirty pads across my face. They called me bitch, but I never bit back. I ain't a dog. Chainsaw, I say. My voice hacks at you. I bet I tear my throat. I try so hard to sound jagged. I get high and say one thing so many times, like Willie Baker, who worked across the street. I saw some kids whip him with a belt while he repeated, please. School out, summertime, and the living lashed. Mama said I should be thankful that the town's worse to coloreds than they are to me, that I'd grow out of my acne. God must love Willie Baker, all that leather and still a please that sounds like music. See, I wouldn't know a sparrow from a mockingbird. The band plays, I just belt out, please. This tune ain't half the blues. I should be thankful. I get high and moan like a lawnmower so nobody notices. I'm such an ugly girl. I'm such an ugly girl. I try to sing like a man. Boys call boy. I turn my face to God. I pray. I wish I could pour oil on everything green in Port Arthur. little piece of my heart now, baby. Break it! Break another little piece of my heart. I'm sorry. I was having my Janis Joplin moment. So I'm going to read a poem that takes a little bit of, just a little bit of explaining. I thought y'all would actually sort of like it. I usually don't read this poem, but since Dr. Gavin's introduction of me was like telling all my business, I'm gonna read this poem that tells all my business in a very fragmented way. And this poem is what we call a hustle. It's a form, you know how like the sonnet is a form, or the villanelle is a form, or the pantoum is a form, but it's a form that's actually older than those forms. It's from the 6th century. It's a 6th century Arabic form. The poem mentions a poet and friend. He's actually mad at me right now. We're kind of fighting each other right now, but he's still my friend. His name is Dwayne Betts, who at the age of 16 was sentenced to 8 years in prison. And you can find out more about the reasons why that happened to him if you read his memoir called A Question of Freedom. And the poem also mentions Nina and Darius, who are two characters played by Nia Long and Lorenz Tate in the 1997 cult film Love Jones. Now, if you haven't seen Love Jones, it's a really, really good film to see on a date night. It works every time. So, you know, if you were wondering why things weren't working, it's because you weren't watching Love Jones. And I just helped you. And then it also mentions Brownfield Copeland, who is a character in The Third Life of Grange Copeland, which is Alice Walker's first novel. It was published in 1970. I love this book. Alice Walker is so widely known for The Color Purple. Often we forget that she wrote other books other than that. And that first book, I think, is so amazing. I find myself, and I don't even do this on purpose, somewhere between Thanksgiving and Christmas, I always read it every year. It's so funny to, like, you know, I don't even like novels. No, I was just joking. So the thing that you have to know about the hustle in order to be able to follow this poem, because it's going to move forward a little bit differently from the other poems I've read, in that it's not narrative in the same way. It's a poem written in couplets, and part of the form asks that each of the couplets somehow be related to one another in a way that you don't really understand until the entire poem is over. Do y'all understand? So it's supposed to have this accumulative effect. There's also a repeated word in almost every other line. You're going to hear me repeat that word. You'll be able to know what that repeated word is. So that's all a part of the form. There's also a little rhyme thing that goes on, but I think you'll hear the rhyme as well. So y'all ready? Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm tired. Hustle. They lie like stones and dare not shift. Even asleep, everyone hears in prison. Dwayne Betts deserves more than this dry ink for his teenage years in prison. In the film we keep watching, Nina takes Darius to a stepper's ball. Lovers hustle, slide, dip, as if none of them has a brother in prison. I dine with humans who think any book full of black characters is about race. A book full of white characters examines insanity near, but never in, prison. His whole family made a barricade of their bodies at the door to room 403. He died without the man he wanted. What use is love at home or in prison? We saw police pull sharks out of the water just to watch them not breathe. A brother meets members of his family as he passes the mirrors in prison. Sundays, I washed and dried her clothes after he threw them into the yard. In the novel I love, Brownfield kills his wife, gets only 7 years in prison. I don't want to point my own sinful finger, so let's use your clean one instead. Some bright citizen reading this never considered a son's short hair in prison. In our house lived 3 men with one name, and all 3 fought or ran. I left Nelson Demery III for Jericho Brown, a name I earned in prison. I'm going to read one last poem, and I just wanted to read it because I'm probably the biggest New Orleans Saints fan in this room. Football season, but the game includes killing other boys in another country. At the end of this beer, I pay a tax, make sure they're dead. A man asks to change the channel, unaware of his own safety. Barflies look at him as if he's spilled the final pint of ale. Loneliness is a practice, like medicine, like law. The law of the land, live in 24 time zones. The last man standing is the first one alone. Which of us is too drunk to stagger home? Not me. I can drink a few more, see the Patriots or the Cowboys or another very long war right here on this stool, watching my money work for me. The heat up and me comfortable enough to complain about it. Thank you.